If I had to pick a juggernaut of video games, it would definitely be the Italian plumber. Nintendo is without a doubt one of the biggest gaming companies on the entire planet. As accomplished as it sounds, they are also the biggest contributor towards undeserving copyright claims, cracking down on modders, hardware engineers, content creators, and so many more. Seriously, I've seen so many videos with so much work and dedication put into them. They just mention Nintendo once and the company reward their passion and dedication with an undeserving copyright claim or a takedown. They are against emulation, and there are certain instances where they have taken down the gameplay that was performed on an emulator. You might think that this is relatively new and Nintendo's just started doing it since YouTube's user base exploded. But actually, no. It goes back as far as we can think back. In the 90s, a couple of modders came up with Game Genie for the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, or Famicom for Japanese audience. This lets you modify different things in your ROM so you could cheat in games or access unused assets of the games in specific instances and much more. Nintendo didn't like this and wanted to go after the developers of Game Genie. The scene wasn't expecting to catch the attention of Nintendo, but it became so huge, selling over millions of units worldwide, and everyone who owned NES wanted to own one. The extremely versatile framework made it a must-have for people who wanted to experience much more than just a gameplay. Seeing the popularity of Game Genie, Nintendo launched a lawsuit against Louis Gallup Toys. They had a massive opportunity to go at the developers from a plausible angle. The angle they used for this lawsuit was derivative work. It's laughable actually. The Game Genie just modified some of the values in-game so you could cheat a little, but they didn't leak Nintendo's source code or used it to build the cartridge. Now, as you might know from my previous video, modifying your console's firmware is legal as long as you don't distribute it. So did Nintendo have a good reason to sue the developers? Maybe. It might seem like a stretch, but in the 80s, because of the great economic crisis and gaming crash in America, people had a really hard time trusting brands, so Nintendo introduced its seal of approval. Any product that had Nintendo's seal of approval was a high-end and premium product and had gone through Nintendo's strict quality control. That is why it was so important for Nintendo to have complete control over their devices and products. While it does sound somewhat rationally derived, it's not. Modern Vintage Gamer echoes it perfectly in his video. If you let your customers do the homebrew scene, there is very little reason for them to pirate and modify the basic input-output system or the firmware. I can't say for certain, but I think they just didn't want anyone to messing with the NES code. The angle they took against the developers may seem rushed, but the decision defined the console gaming. The court ruled that the Game Genie did not perform derivative work, so while modifying the firmware could be considered somewhat temperament, if it wasn't distributed, it is not illegal. Game Genie won this lawsuit. This case would set the precedent for what was yet to come. Anytime a major manufacturer wanted to lock down their console in America, they were referred to this case. The funny thing is, devs actually came up with an NES emulator for the PC in the early 90s. Of course, Nintendo didn't like this, but as long as you had a dump of your firmware and dump of your ROM, you were in the clear. Zelda, Mario, Luigi, Smash Bros, Animal Crossing, they're all Nintendo's IP. In recent times, if you made a video showcasing these games on an emulator, you would have most likely received a copyright strike from Nintendo. In my opinion, I don't think the emulator is the enemy here. The legal way at least is to own a Switch, dump your firmware, on a ROM, dump your ROM, and then play. The fact that they do this to their loyal audience is truly disheartening. So what can we learn from all this? If Nintendo had won that case, the landscape of the emulation industry and the console industry would have been extremely different. And I want to make it clear that it wasn't because of lack of trying. This company needs to adjust to the modern times, acknowledge their fans and their contributions towards their IP. With that being said, this is Roguehead. I hope you guys enjoyed this perspective. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you guys later.